Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get rolling, and whoever hops on late can figure it out from there. Well, hi everyone. My name is Nick. For those of you that have not met me, I'm a marketing and sales associate with B&B Finder. First thing I do is, first thing I want to thank you all for joining our webinar. I'm really excited to hear what Sebastien has to say. I also want to thank the Cloudbeds team for giving the presentation, especially Sebastien. All of us here at B&B Finder are really excited to work with Cloudbeds in the future as we move towards some real-time availability and real-time bookings on our site. Now I'm going to present or introduce our presenter today. Sebastien is the Vice President of Partnerships at Cloudbeds. For those of you who aren't familiar, Cloudbeds is an award-winning hospitality management platform that seamlessly combines solutions for front desk, revenue distribution, guest acquisition, and guest management in a single unified system, enhanced by a marketplace of third-party integrations. For the past 5 years, Sebastien has overseen partnerships and industry relations for the global company. Prior to joining Cloudbeds, Sebastien spent more than 14 years at Expedia, managing lodging connectivity for independent and chain hotels, as well as vacation rentals. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sebastien.
Thank you so much, Nick. Really appreciate you allowing me to speak to you. Let me just get the screen up and running. Welcome, and I'm delighted to be here today. I have the best job at Cloudbeds. I talk and listen all day to companies, to hoteliers, to association, to industry experts. And the conversations that I have had and will have are shaping the content of this presentation. In a way, they're also shaping what we at Cloudbeds are working on. So let's get started. I want to take you on a journey that covers these 3 topics. What are travel expectations today, preferences versus expectations, and how we define them, and then walk you through the future state, the future vision of guest expectations in a fully digitalized world. I may be nerding out on this section, so bear with me, and I look forward to your questions as we go through this content. We can't talk about today without looking back. There are 2 major factors driving travelers' expectations today. And the one that everyone is familiar with, or the one that still sort of sits in our bones, is of course that there's an urgency. This has been our reality for many regions and countries for the past 2 years. We've been confined to our homes. We've stopped traveling for business. We've stopped seeing our friends and families and discovering new places. The world, depending on where you live and depending on where you typically, how you typically move around, the world has been deprived of almost 2 years of travel. And according to the World Travel Tourism Council, the industry has been deprived of almost $5 trillion in travel-related spend. Now, the other factor that is driving change is that in the meantime, we spend a lot of time in front of screens to work, to educate ourselves, but to also dream of a time when we can travel again. And content creators have been busy serving us delicacies from every corner of the world. What has this led to? Well, pent-up demand is real. Here's a statistic that started in 2021 and captured US travel sentiment. Since Q1, it has been at an all-time high. We've been itching to get outside, meet up with friends and families, and really spend time with people that we care for and that we haven't caught up with some time. Now, what has this led to? Whether it's in the news or in social media, we have to be patient. Here are some examples of new competencies that we've developed. How to get in line. Another example that I want to share with you about reality versus Instagram has to do with the fact that some of these content creators have actually started creating new content, if you will. How soon until a customer arrives and asks for a room with a bed overlooking the lake. This is an example of a beautiful hotel, the Fairmont Lake Louise, where this beautiful couple is creating a new piece of inventory that doesn't exist otherwise before. Now, rightfully so, Brooklyn is asking here, please tell me that you moved back the hotel. Now, this is the same situation anywhere in the world. And these are a couple of snapshots I took from a recent trip about 2 weeks ago when visiting partners in Europe. This is Amsterdam Airport and I believe London. This is outside the terminal building and this is inside the terminal building. But the fact of the matter is that fewer airplanes are in the air. There are fewer seats for us available than in 2019, about 30% fewer seats. Airports and hotels are missing staff, pilots, receptionists, and often every basic equipment like linen or soaps. So we are at this very interesting discrepancy, if you will. On one hand, our population has become digital expert. Every grandparent now knows how to do a video conference and to reach us at all times. On the other hand, we're still slowed down by some operational processes, a lot of them driven by government standards and implementation. This is a snapshot I took when I was on my first business trip and I was queuing for waiting to access my hotel room. This was taken back in September of 2021. So let's talk about preferences and expectation and define them. What's the difference? What's a preference? What's an expectation? I'll use, in order to create a common ground, I'll use the example of a pizza. Expectations are basically the guest is what the guest is anticipating what will happen. It is the baseline requirement. When you order a pizza, you expect it will be hot. You expect that it will nourish you. Preferences are the toppings you want on your pizza. If done correctly, it's the extras, the personalized touches that gets a great review, word of mouth referral. Guest loyalty without a point system brings them back even if the price is a little higher than a competitor. Let's think about a few of these examples in hospitality. When we start our travel search, we often go to the top retailers in the world. And I'm using Booking.com and Airbnb as an example, but we could have picked anyone. These top retailers are very customer oriented and capture intent, motivation, and preferences early in search. When I personally travel, for me, Wi-Fi and the pool, as well as air conditioning, may be the most important things. I select that, and as a result, I see products and services that meet those requirements. The choices are specific to the location of the customer, stay patterns, and destination of choice, providing travelers relevant responses that meet their expectations and preferences. Now, one important question that I sometimes have: do you think that these search parameters are shared with hoteliers? Meaning, in my specific example that I highlighted, that Wi-Fi and air conditioning was part of my critical criteria for selecting the property that I ultimately ended up booking. There is an opportunity here, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. When we think about guest preferences and expectations, we can't ignore what's happening from a loyalty program perspective. This is an example from Marriott, where you as a Marriott Bonvoy member can select your room and stay preferences. Things like bed types, room types, floor location, and pillow types. Accor recently launched their new program, Accor Live Limitless All, that goes further. It does capture not only room and bed preferences, but it really tries to understand who you are as a consumer, what your personal preferences are, what type of music you listen to, what you'd like to do in your spare time. Since they want to engage with their audience throughout, I guess, the lifetime value of that customer and create services and destinations that are catering to our personal preferences and expectations, if you will. Now, when you look at both of these examples, what's really interesting is that on one hand, you have traveler retailers that are promising, you have guests that have their preferences and expectations, but hoteliers are limited. They're limited by what information they have access to. In the example I mentioned earlier, where Airbnb, where I selected Wi-Fi and air conditioning as a critical component, and that information is not necessarily transmitted, the hotelier doesn't know necessarily that these were my top criteria factors. And so it's important that they're met throughout my stay. We have limited resources as hoteliers. We may not have as many staff members currently available as we would like. And attributes are not easily changed. I cannot, as a hotelier, overnight create a pool when there was no pool previously in existence. Now, in summary, we have a digital customer. We see a huge increase in travel demand. And unfortunately, at times we lack the resources translating to increased labor costs. I'm sure you've seen everywhere left and right, the earnings or the hourly rates of employees increasing over time. Labor cost has been a challenge for everyone that is looking to hire and seek employees at this point in time. So I want to share with you that from our perspective, there is a digital transformation that is happening. The industry as a whole, travel as a whole, whether that's in airlines or hospitality, is finally waking up. Everyone is working hard on delivering a digital guest experience. And what that experience could look like, Microsoft Labs defined it about 15 years ago. I want to share this clip with you that comes eerily close to what everyone is working on.
Welcome to Johannesburg International Airport. Please approach the road to create your pickup zone.
The video goes on for another few minutes and talks about, how the work environment will change, but I invite you to look it up on YouTube. It's actually quite exciting. So let's talk about that future state and how close we are to that future state, to that future experience that we all want to enable using technology and digital tools. Now, we can't talk about future without covering Web 3.0 and specifically talking about the consumer experience. Web 3.0 includes three core components: privacy and data control, shared financial benefits, and enhanced experiences. So let's define them very quickly before we go into more details. Privacy and data control is about the consumer or the customer taking control of where data is stored and what information is shared. Shared financial benefits talks about digital art. You must have all heard about NFTs by now. It's really around the artist taking control of how the art is distributed and how it is monetized. On enhanced experience, I'm sure you've heard of Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse, but maybe more closely in my household, I'm faced with an 8-year-old that is very comfortably playing Roblox, and it is something that scares me. It's all about virtual digital realities, if you will. However, since we talked about traveler expectations and preferences, I will focus on data and your personal information. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, who owns our data today? And intuitively, we go to the companies that we're most familiar with, whether that's Google or Facebook or other big internet companies that control most of our consumer data at this point. And what these corporations have often in common is that they extract most value from that data. We may have access as consumers and customers to information. There is a certain social value in the network that these platforms enable. But the corporations really extract revenue, marketing opportunities, and insights. Now, the good news with Web 3.0 is that data control is shifting back to the customer, and that's a good thing. What many concepts in this area, or this sort of, in Web 3.0 are addressing is the following. It's about control, privacy, and distribution and use. But it also addresses some critical pain points in hospitality when we maintain as hospitality professional customer data. So let's look at some real examples. A customer is checking into a hotel, providing the hotelier critical information about themselves, such as address, email, maybe even a phone number, that are things that we are capturing during the registration process. Now, the interesting thought here is this information is outdated the moment you capture it. The customer doesn't keep this information current, nor does he have an incentive to keep it current. The challenge number 2 is around use and accuracy. How many times have you as a customer heard the question before? Have you stayed with us before? Now, in the example of in Microsoft's video, when you saw the arrival of the customer arriving at the property, she didn't have to answer that question. The valet didn't have to answer that or ask that question. He already knew who she was because we enabled the transmission of digital information. So let's look at a few examples of companies working on this right now. Here's a company called Solid. It is invented by the same person who invented, or is driven by the same person who invented the World Wide Web, Sir Tim Berners-Lee. What Solid is about is your data and your choice. You grant or revoke access to any slice of your information as needed, and you determine as well which people and applications can access your data. More closer to travel is the Identity Foundation. They're working on standards around self-sovereign identity, making it possible for us to remove, if you will, the need for a printed passport. Again, it is about allowing us to make reservations, check in, and even open their doors using the self-sovereign identity. A more recent example that you may be familiar with is a recent update that Apple launched. They made a significant change to the privacy setting of your mobile operating system, allowing iPhone users to choose whether advertisers could track them. Since Apple introduced that feature, the vast majority of iPhone users have opted to block tracking. Apple will now forbid the collection and sharing of data by businesses unless people opt to go for it. Now, our future vision, or my future vision, is that the closest thing to a digital passport containing your identity and personal preferences is this little device. And I hope you can see this because I don't necessarily see my screen, but I'm talking about the phone. It identifies you. You can use it for payments, communication, almost everything, and is, in our opinion, the key in unlocking a great guest experience. Now, regardless of whether you captured guest data and preferences digitally or manually, meaning offline, as guests, we ask ourselves, what do you do with the information I provided you, and does it enhance my experience? If it does, our expectations are exceeded, and we become, as consumers and customers, loyal to your brand and your services that you provide. At Cloudbeds, we're working on a fully digitalized guest experience, enabling a personalized guest journey powered by technology. Check us out this fall as we launch a brand new product that empowers the entire guest journey. And with that, Nick, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sebastien. So first, I'm going to launch a poll. If everyone could just give us some quick feedback on the presentation, and then I'll let some time or leave some time for questions for Sebastien. So the poll is launched. You guys can start filling it out. But if anyone has any questions for Sebastien, go ahead. You may have to type them into the question and answer section because we don't have audio for attendees.
Maybe a question for you, Nick. Are you blocking the tracking on your iPhone?
My block for some apps, I am blocking tracking. For some apps, honestly, I'm fine with them tracking. Okay. It might be a generational thing, okay, but I would rather have ads that are tailored to, my interests and my hobbies than, random ads for things I don't need.
Okay, very good.
And yeah, that's what I would say about that. What about you, Sebastien?
I'm blocked. I'm blocked everywhere. I block everything. I don't know where I am. No, I mean, look, if to your point, if I think that it would improve my experience personally, that I would get better content and maybe potential offers, I would probably be inclined to share it, right? But my experience has always been, that I get retargeted ads, that some of them are just, haunting me. I've already purchased that mattress. Why am I seeing for another 60 days an ad? That's just not improving my guest experience, or sort of my experience as a consumer. So, some of that I will just change.
It is really interesting. I've talked to a lot of people about this in different, age groups and demographics. Mm-hmm. And it seems more and more that younger generations, kind of more my age, are okay giving up some of our privacy in exchange for, maybe a better experience of, the bank is tracking my location so that it knows if a card gets swiped in a different location than where I am, that's going to be marked as fraud. Or, some of the advertisements, or I even have some friends that track my location just because it's easier for them to do that, to know, if they're trying to find me or something.
Yeah. Well, I would want to know where my kids are at all times. So if I can track them, for sure, that's perfectly fine.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, there's one. Can you see that one, Sebastien, in the chat?
Yes.
Great.
It's a much bigger challenge for a very small bed and breakfast to adapt consumer preferences than for a hotel chain like Marriott. Do you have any specific advice for us small guys? Rosa, I hope that's her name. Yeah, I do. Look, I think the advantage as a small business owner you have is that you're almost more agile than Marriott. We have a lot of our innkeepers that run on Cloudbeds that have adopted WhatsApp and text messages way before Marriott ever thought about these things. And I'm sorry that I don't mean to say anything negative about Marriott. It's just I feel a lot of owners and operators that can make decisions themselves can actually, adopt new technology much faster than than anyone else. We partner, for instance, with a product called Whistle that enables guest experiences, guest communication, the exchange of an engagement with customers way before check-in. And that's something that can be implemented within a couple of weeks versus, Marriott may take a couple of years to upgrade and in exchange their technology stack. So I think my recommendation, Rosa, is don't be afraid to try it out. There are some tools and solutions out there that can help you compete against the big players.
Great, thank you. And then Carolyn, I see you raised your hand. I'm going to allow you to talk if you want to ask a question. You're currently muted, or you can just type it into the chat if you prefer. Or not. Great. Well, if there are no more questions, great, Carolyn, same question. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Sebastien, for your time and information. I found it really interesting. I nerded out about it for a little bit. I really enjoy thinking about the future of travel and how technology can really help that and improve the guest experience. And also on the supply side, the efficiency and experience for them too. So thank you, everyone. And I will be posting this video on YouTube, and you'll be receiving it in a follow-up email. So if you want to watch it again or send to any of your friends, feel free to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick, for having us.